What I saw at 3 a.m. will leave you questioning reality. Insomnia is a strange companion. It sits with you in the dark hours when the world feels like it belongs to something else, when the familiar shadows of your bedroom take on shapes that daylight will later dismiss as tricks of the mind. I've struggled with sleeplessness for years, but nothing prepared me for what I would witness during those dead hours between midnight and dawn, hours when reality itself seems to loosen its grip on the world. My name is Rachel Porter, and I'm a night shift nurse at Mercy General Hospital. Or at least, I was. I'm telling you the story now because I need someone to know what I saw, what I experienced during 3 consecutive nights that changed everything I thought I understood about the nature of existence itself. It started on a Tuesday in October. I had come off a particularly exhausting 12-hour shift and arrived home to my apartment around 11:45 p.m. The building where I live is one of those converted warehouses in the industrial district. Exposed brick, high ceilings, lots of character, but also lots of strange sounds that the landlord attributes to settling and old pipes. I went through my usual routine: shower, herbal tea, 30 minutes of mindless television to decompress. By 1 a.m., I was in bed with my sleeping pills on the nightstand, though I'd been trying to wean myself off them. The dependency was becoming concerning, and I wanted to break the cycle. That night, I decided to try falling asleep naturally. It was a mistake. I drifted off sometime around 1:30, but something woke me at exactly 3:17 a.m. I know the exact time because I've developed a habit of checking my phone whenever I wake during the night, tracking my sleep patterns in an app my therapist recommended. But this awakening was different. I hadn't been roused by a noise or a dream. It was more like someone had flipped a switch in my consciousness, pulling me from deep sleep to full alertness in an instant. My heart was racing, and I had the overwhelming sensation that something in my apartment had changed. The digital clock on my nightstand cast a faint blue glow across the bedroom, just enough light to see the basic shapes of furniture. Everything appeared normal. The chair by the window with my clothes draped over it. The dresser with its collection of books and medications. The closet door, slightly ajar as I always left it. But the quality of the silence was wrong. You know how silence isn't really silent? There's always ambient noise, the hum of electronics, distant traffic, the building's heating system. But at 3:17 a.m., my apartment had fallen into a silence, so complete it felt like being underwater. No sound penetrated from the outside world, and even my own breathing seemed muffled and distant. I sat up in bed, straining to hear anything that might explain why I felt such intense unease. That's when I noticed the shadows. The streetlight outside my window usually creates a pattern of light and shadow on my bedroom wall. The silhouette of the fire escape's metal grating broken into geometric shapes. But now those shadows were moving in ways that didn't correspond to any external light source. They were shifting, flowing like liquid across the wall, forming patterns that almost looked like writing in a language I didn't recognize. I blinked hard, convinced this was some kind of hypnagogic hallucination, the result of being caught between waking and sleeping states. But I was fully awake, and the shadows continued to move. I reached for my phone to use its flashlight, but when I pressed the power button, nothing happened. The screen remained dark, though it had been at 70% battery when I went to bed. I tried my bedside lamp next. Click. Nothing. The power was out, except the digital clock was still glowing its persistent 3:17 a.m. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, enough that I could see my breath forming small clouds in the blue light from the clock. I pulled my blanket tighter around my shoulders and forced myself to think rationally. Power outage. The clock must have a battery backup I'd never noticed. The strange shadows were just my eyes adjusting to the darkness. But then I heard it. Footsteps in my living room. Slow, deliberate, moving from one side of the apartment to the other. Not the quick scurrying of rodents or the random settling sounds I'd grown accustomed to. These were unmistakably human footsteps, heavy and purposeful. I lived alone. The deadbolt on my front door had been locked. I checked it twice before bed, as I always did. The footsteps stopped directly outside my bedroom door. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body had locked with primal fear, the kind that shuts down rational thought and leaves you frozen like prey, hoping the predator will lose interest and move on. My bedroom door was closed, the old-fashioned kind with a keyhole, and through that keyhole, I could see a faint light emanating from the living room, a light that shouldn't exist if the power was out. The doorknob began to turn. I want to tell you that I did something brave, that I called 911, grabbed a weapon, confronted the intruder. But the truth is I just sat there in my bed, paralyzed, watching the doorknob rotate with mechanical precision until the latch clicked free. The door swung open slowly, revealing the living room beyond. But it wasn't my living room anymore. The space beyond my bedroom door had transformed into something that couldn't exist within the physical dimensions of my apartment. Instead of the modest living area with its second-hand couch and bookshelf, I was looking into a vast chamber that stretched away into darkness. The walls were the same exposed brick as my building, but they extended upward far beyond where my ceiling should be, disappearing into shadows that the strange light couldn't penetrate. And in that impossible space, I saw people. They were standing motionless throughout the chamber, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, men and women of various ages, all wearing what appeared to be normal street clothes from different eras. A woman in a 1950s dress, a man in a business suit that looked contemporary, a teenager in clothing I recognized from the early 2000s. They were all facing my bedroom door, facing me. Their eyes were open, but something was wrong with them. They didn't blink. They didn't move at all except for a barely perceptible swaying, like mannequins in a breeze. And their eyes reflected the strange light in a way that human eyes shouldn't, creating tiny points of illumination in the darkness. I don't know how long I sat there staring at them, at this impossible space that had replaced my living room. Time seemed to have stopped along with every other natural law. The clock still read 3:17 a.m. Then, as one, all of the figures took a single step forward. The synchronized movement broke my paralysis. I screamed and scrambled backward, pressing myself against the headboard of my bed. But my scream made no sound. The complete silence had swallowed it, just as it had swallowed every other noise. The figures took another step, and another. They were moving toward my bedroom with the same mechanical precision I'd heard in the footsteps, their faces expressionless, their reflective eyes never blinking. In the silence, I could hear something else now, a low humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a frequency that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. I grabbed my pillow and pressed it against my face, childish instinct overriding rationality. If I couldn't see them, maybe they would disappear. Maybe this was just the worst nightmare I'd ever experienced, and smothering myself in darkness would somehow reset reality. When I lowered the pillow, my bedroom door was closed. The digital clock read 3:18 a.m. The power flickered back on, and with it came the blessed return of normal ambient sound. The hum of my refrigerator, distant traffic, the building's heating system kicking in. I sat in my bed shaking, gulping air like I'd been drowning, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might rupture. For the next hour, I didn't move from that spot. I just sat there with all the lights on, staring at my closed bedroom door, waiting for it to open again. It never did. When dawn finally broke, I forced myself to get up and check the apartment. Everything was exactly as it should be. No signs of intrusion, no impossible chambers, no silent figures with reflective eyes. My front door was still locked from the inside, deadbolt secure. I called in sick to work. I couldn't imagine facing another human being. Couldn't trust myself to perform my nursing duties when I was questioning whether I'd experienced a psychotic break. But as the day wore on and exhaustion overtook my adrenaline, I began to rationalize what had happened. I'd been sleep deprived, had skipped my medication, was under stress from working too many shifts. The human brain is capable of producing incredibly vivid hallucinations under the right conditions. What I'd experienced was terrifying, yes, but it could be explained. I took my sleeping pill that night. I made sure of it. But at 3:17 a.m., I woke up again. And this time, the bedroom door was already open. The impossible chamber was back, but this time I could see more details. The brick walls were covered with something that looked like condensation, but it moved with purpose, forming patterns and symbols that seemed to carry meaning just beyond my comprehension. The strange light came from no identifiable source. It simply existed, a pale blue luminescence that made everything look like it had been filmed with an old camera. The figures were there too, in the exact positions I'd seen them the night before. Same people, same clothes, same unsettling stillness. But now I could see their faces more clearly, and what I saw made my blood freeze. I recognized some of them. The woman in the 1950s dress was Margaret Holloway, a patient who had died in my hospital 3 years ago. I'd been assigned to her care during her final weeks, and I remembered her face because she'd been so kind, always thanking me even when I knew the treatments were causing her pain. The man in the contemporary business suit was James Morrison, another patient, heart attack in an ER. I'd been part of the team that tried to revive him. We'd failed. The teenager was Melissa Chun, 16 years old. Car accident. DOA. They were all people who had died at Mercy General. People I had cared for. People I had watched slip away despite our best efforts. And now they were standing in this impossible space beyond my bedroom door, swaying slightly, their eyes reflecting light that shouldn't exist. This time, when they took their synchronized step forward, I didn't freeze. Some part of my nurse's training kicked in, the part that stays calm during emergencies and focuses on action over panic. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. It was dead again, stuck at 3:17 a.m., and threw it as hard as I could at the nearest figure. The phone passed through Margaret Holloway's chest, as if she were made of smoke. It clattered somewhere in an impossible chamber, the sound muffled and distant despite the relatively short throw. The figures continued their advance, each step bringing them closer to my bedroom. I could see now that there were far more than I'd initially thought. The chamber extended back into darkness, and in that darkness, I could see hundreds more of them, possibly thousands, all swaying in unison, all taking synchronized steps toward me. I ran to my bedroom window, yanked it open, and looked out at the fire escape. The metal grating was solid and real beneath the streetlights, the city visible beyond. Reality still existed out there. Whatever was happening in my apartment, the outside world remained unchanged. I climbed out onto the fire escape in my pajamas, the October night cold enough to make me gasp. I descended to the street level, my bare feet numb against the metal, and looked back up at my apartment window. The lights were on. Through the window, I could see my bedroom exactly as it should be. No impossible chamber, no figures, just my normal bedroom with its rumpled bed and ordinary furniture. I stood on the sidewalk for 30 minutes, shivering, watching my window. Nothing changed. A few cars passed, their drivers glancing at me with concern, but no one stopped. At 3:47 a.m., a police cruiser pulled up. "Everything okay, ma'am?" the officer asked, clearly worried about a woman in pajamas standing alone on a deserted street at 4 a.m. I thought I saw someone in my apartment. I lied, unable to explain the truth, but I think it was just a nightmare. "I'm sorry, I know I look crazy." The officers insisted on checking my apartment. They found nothing unusual, no signs of intrusion, everything secure. They were kind about it, professional, but I could see the concern in their eyes. They took down my information and suggested I might want to call someone, a friend or family member, to stay with me. I thanked them and went back inside, this time taking a sleeping pill strong enough to knock out a horse. I needed oblivion, needed to shut down my consciousness before 3:17 a.m. could come around again. It didn't help. I woke at exactly 3:17 a.m., the bedroom door open, the impossible chamber waiting. But this time, something was different. One of the figures had moved closer to my doorway, close enough that I could see the name tag she was wearing. It was my name tag, my badge from Mercy General Hospital, with my photo and identification number. And the figure wearing it was me. She stood there in her nursing scrubs, the same ones I'd worn to work countless times. Her face was my face, but wrong in the same way all the others were wrong. No expression, no life, just that terrible stillness and those reflective eyes. She raised one hand slowly, mechanically, and pointed at me. Then she pointed at the chamber. The message was clear. "Join us." I slammed my bedroom door and dragged my dresser in front of it. I piled everything I could move against that door, chairs, boxes, my nightstand. I was crying now, great heaving sobs that made my chest ache. This wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't stress or sleep deprivation or medication withdrawal. This was something real, something that had been showing me a truth I didn't want to accept. Through the barricaded door, I could hear them, not footsteps this time, but breathing, dozens of people, hundreds maybe, all breathing in perfect synchronization. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The door began to glow with that same pale blue light. I grabbed my car keys and fled, not even bothering to change out of my pajamas. I drove aimlessly through the empty city streets until dawn, then parked in a 24-hour diner and sat in a booth drinking coffee that I couldn't taste, watching the sunrise paint the sky in colors that seemed somehow less real than the blue light in that impossible chamber. I couldn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't face another night of waking at 3:17 a.m. to find myself staring at my own dead-eyed doppelganger. But I also couldn't run forever. I needed answers. I needed to understand what was happening and why it was happening to me. That's when I remembered Dr. Eleanor Webb, a psychiatrist who sometimes consulted at Mercy General on particularly difficult cases. She specialized in sleep disorders and unusual perceptual experiences. If anyone might be able to help me understand what I was experiencing, it would be her. I called her office as soon as they opened, explained I was experiencing a crisis, and begged for an emergency appointment. Her secretary, hearing the desperation in my voice, agreed to squeeze me in that afternoon. Dr. Webb's office was in an old building downtown, the kind with marble floors and ornate woodwork that spoke of a bygone era when craftsmanship mattered. I sat in her waiting room, exhausted beyond measure, wondering how I would even begin to explain what I'd experienced. When she finally called me in, I found myself face to face with a woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes and a sort of calm presence that immediately put me at ease. She gestured for me to sit in a comfortable chair opposite her desk. "Rachel," she said gently, "tell me what's been happening." And I did. I told her everything. The impossible chamber, the figures, the synchronized breathing, my own doppelganger pointing at me. I expected her to start talking about hallucinations and psychiatric medications. Instead, she did something that terrified me more than anything I'd experienced in my apartment. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. "Is this what you saw?" she asked. The photograph showed an impossible chamber with brick walls extending into darkness, filled with figures standing in perfect stillness, their eyes reflecting an unseen light. "How do you have this?" I whispered. "Because I've seen it too," Dr. Webb replied. "And so have dozens of other people who work at Mercy General Hospital. We've all woken at 3:17 a.m. to witness what you're witnessing. But Rachel, you need to understand something crucial. This isn't a hallucination. This is something else entirely. Something that shouldn't be possible, but is." She leaned forward, her expression grave. "And the longer we ignore it, the stronger it becomes." Dr. Webb's office suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what she just told me. Other people from the hospital had experienced this. It wasn't unique to me. It wasn't a personal psychotic break. Somehow, that made it worse. "How long has this been happening?" I asked. "The first documented case was 3 years ago," Dr. Webb replied, pulling a thick file from her desk drawer. "A respiratory therapist named Thomas Garrett. He came to me with the exact same story you just told. Waking at 3:17 a.m., seeing an impossible chamber, recognizing patients who had died under his care." She spread photographs across her desk, all showing variations of the same scene. Different apartments, different angles, but always the same impossible space. The same still figures with their reflective eyes. "Thomas thought he was losing his mind," she continued. "I treated him for what I initially believed was severe PTSD combined with sleep disorder. But then it happened to someone else. A surgical nurse named Patricia Lynn, then an ER doctor, then a transport worker. Always people who work at Mercy General. Always at 3:17 a.m. Always the same vision. But what is it?" I demanded. "What are we seeing?" Dr. Webb stood and walked to her window, staring out at the city. "I've spent 3 years researching this phenomenon. I've consulted with colleagues across the country, examined similar cases from other hospitals. What I've learned, she paused, choosing her words carefully. What I've learned will sound impossible, Rachel, but you've already seen impossible things, so perhaps you'll be able to accept it. Just tell me. Mercy General Hospital isn't just a building, she said. It's a collection point, a place where the boundary between life and death has become permeable. Every person who dies there, every consciousness that separates from its physical form, doesn't completely move on to whatever comes after death. A piece of them remains, trapped in a space that exists alongside our reality, but separate from it. I thought about the figures I'd seen, Margaret Holloway, James Morrison, Melissa Chun, all people who had died at Mercy General. But why are they appearing in our homes? Why at 3:17 a.m.? Because 3:17 a.m. is when the barrier is thinnest, Dr. Webb explained. It's called the dead hour in folklore, the time when paranormal activity is most likely to occur. And it's not random. There's a physiological reason. The human body's circadian rhythm reaches its lowest point between 3 and 4 a.m. Our consciousness is most vulnerable, most open perceiving things that exist outside normal sensory experience. She returned to her desk and pulled out another file, this one containing medical records and incident reports. Everyone who experiences these visions has had significant contact with dying patients at Mercy General. We've formed a connection with that place, with the liminal space where death occurs. And now it's following us home. But I saw myself, I said, my voice cracking. I saw a version of me wearing my uniform, standing with the others. What does that mean? Dr. Webb's expression became even more serious. That's the progression I've been documenting. First, you see the patients who died under your care. Then, after repeated exposures, you begin to see yourself among them. It's a warning, Rachel. The barrier is weakening. The space where those consciousnesses are trapped is trying to expand, and it needs new anchors, new people to help maintain its existence. You're saying it wants to trap us there? To make us part of whatever those things are? Not exactly. It's more complex than that. The consciousnesses trapped in that space aren't fully dead, but they're not fully alive either. They're maintained in a state of suspended existence, and that maintenance requires energy. The hospital provides that energy through the constant cycle of life and death occurring within its walls. But the system is unstable. It needs help to sustain itself. Dr. Webb pulled out the final document from her file, a schematic drawing of Mercy General Hospital, with certain areas highlighted in red. I've mapped the deaths over the past 5 years. The pattern is undeniable. Certain locations in the hospital have significantly higher mortality rates than others. The ICU on the 4th floor, operating room 7, the hospice wing's east corridor. These aren't statistical anomalies. They're focal points where the barrier is thinnest. I studied the map, recognizing the locations. I'd worked in all of them. So what do we do? How do we stop this? That's the question I've been trying to answer for 3 years, Dr. Webb admitted. I've tried everything, therapy, medication, even attempted interventions in the hospital itself. Nothing has worked. The visions continue. More staff members report experiences every month. And the ones who saw themselves in that chamber, she trailed off. What happened to them? Most quit their jobs at Mercy General and moved away. Distance seems to help. The visions become less frequent if you remove yourself from the hospital. But a few didn't leave. Thomas Garrett, the first case, continued working there despite experiencing the visions nightly. Where is he now? Dr. Webb's expression told me the answer before she spoke. He died 6 months ago. An aneurysm while on shift. No warning, no prior symptoms. And Rachel, when he died, he was found standing in a storage closet on the 4th floor, one of the focal points. His eyes were open, but there was no one home. It's as if his consciousness had already left before his body stopped functioning. The implications of what she was telling me crashed over me like a wave. The chamber I'd seen wasn't just a hallucination or a glimpse of some spiritual realm. It was a trap, a place where consciousness could be captured and held indefinitely. And I was being marked as the next victim. I can't go back to work, I said. I won't. I understand. But Rachel, there's something else you need to know. The visions don't stop just because you quit your job. They may become less intense if you stay away from the hospital. But that space has marked you. You formed a connection with it, and it won't let go easily. Then what am I supposed to do? Just wait for it to claim me, like it claimed Thomas. Dr. Webb reached across the desk and took my hand. There is one option, an experimental approach that I've been developing with a few trusted colleagues. It's risky, and I can't guarantee it will work, but it's based on everything we've learned about this phenomenon. Tell me, we have to go to the source. We have to enter the chamber while fully conscious and confront whatever intelligence is maintaining it. We need to find a way to close the barrier from the other side. I pulled my hand back, shaking my head. That's insane. You're asking me to voluntarily walk into the place that's trying to trap me. I'm asking you to take control of the situation instead of waiting to be victimized by it. The chamber appears to you at 3:17 a.m., whether you want it to or not. But what if you went there on your own terms, prepared and with a specific goal? And what exactly would that goal be? To find the core, the central point where all these trapped consciousnesses are anchored. To understand what's sustaining the barrier and find a way to disrupt it. If we can free those trapped souls, the chamber should collapse and the connection to our world should break. I wanted to refuse. Every rational part of my brain was screaming that this was a terrible idea. But I thought about what Dr. Webb had said. The visions wouldn't stop just because I wanted them to. They would continue, night after night, 3:17 a.m., until eventually I ended up like Thomas Garrett, a consciousness trapped between life and death. My body continuing to function, while the essential part of me that made me human was imprisoned in that impossible space. How would we even do this? I asked. Dr. Webb stood and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a leather-bound journal that looked old and worn. I've been studying everything I can find about liminal spaces, about the boundaries between consciousness and reality. There are techniques, rituals developed by various cultures over centuries, designed to allow controlled travel between realms. You're talking about magic. I'm talking about applied consciousness manipulation. Call it whatever makes you comfortable. But Rachel, I've tested these techniques myself. I've entered the chamber and come back. It's possible. You've been inside 3 times. I've mapped parts of it, documented what I've seen, but I've never been able to reach the core. I get turned around, disoriented. The space doesn't follow normal geometric rules. It's like a maze that actively resists navigation. But with more people who have strong connections to the trapped consciousnesses, we might be able to reach further. How many people are you talking about? There are 5 of us who have agreed to make the attempt. All staff from Mercy General. All experiencing the same visions. Tomorrow night, we're going to enter the chamber together at 3:17 a.m. and attempt to find the core. I'm asking you to join us. I looked at the journal in her hands, at the photographs scattered across her desk, at the schematic of the hospital with its marked focal points. Everything in my life had been leading to this moment. Years of nursing, of being present at the moment of death, of forming connections with patients who would pass from this world while under my care. If I do this, I said slowly, and it doesn't work, if we get trapped in there, then we'll have our answer about what comes after death. Dr. Webb replied with a sad smile. But Rachel, I don't think we will. I think we're going to succeed. Because unlike those trapped consciousnesses, we'll be entering that space while fully alive, with our full awareness intact. We'll have an anchor to reality that they don't have. I spent the rest of that day and all of the next preparing myself for what we were about to attempt. Dr. Webb gave me the journal to study, filled with techniques for maintaining consciousness during altered states, for protecting one's sense of self when reality becomes fluid and malleable. The other participants arrived at Dr. Webb's office that evening. Jennifer Park, an ICU nurse, David Morrison, an anesthesiologist, Lisa Chun, a surgical tech, and Marcus Webb, Dr. Webb's son, who worked as a hospital administrator. All of them had the same haunted look in their eyes, the same exhaustion that comes from weeks of disturbed sleep and encounters with the impossible. We're doing this together, Dr. Webb said as we gathered in a circle. We watch out for each other. If anyone starts to become disoriented or begins to separate from the group, the others pull them back. Our connection to each other will be our lifeline. At 3 a.m., we prepared for crossing. We had synchronized our watches, agreed on protocols, and each of us had written goodbye letters to loved ones, just in case. Dr. Webb led us through meditation techniques designed to sharpen our awareness and strengthen our sense of individual identity. At 3:17 a.m., the chamber opened. This time, entering the chamber was different. Instead of waking to find it already present, I watched it form in real time. Dr. Webb's office walls began to shimmer and fade, the ordinary reality of bookshelves and file cabinets dissolving like watercolor in rain. The impossible space emerged from underneath, as if it had always been there, waiting for the right moment to become visible. The 5 of us stood in a circle, holding hands, and together we stepped forward into the impossible chamber. The transition was like walking through a membrane. A moment of resistance, then a sensation of falling forward even though my feet remained on solid ground. The temperature dropped immediately, and that complete silence I had experienced in my apartment descended like a blanket over everything. The chamber stretched away from us in all directions, vast and dark beyond the reach of the pale blue light that illuminated the area immediately around us. And everywhere, standing in perfect rows that extended into the darkness, were the figures. I could see all of them now. Every patient I'd ever lost. Every death I'd witnessed during my years at Mercy General. They stood motionless, swaying slightly, their eyes reflecting our presence with that same unnatural luminescence. "Stay together," Dr. Webb whispered, though her voice sounded muffled and distant. "Don't let go of each other's hands. The chamber will try to separate us." We moved forward in our circle, and immediately I understood what she meant. The space around us began to shift and distort. What appeared to be a straight path would curve unexpectedly, or the ground beneath our feet would tilt at impossible angles while remaining perfectly level. The chamber was actively resisting our navigation, trying to disorient us and break our formation. "There," Marcus said, pointing towards something in the distance. "Do you see it?" Through the rows of motionless figures, I could see a source of brighter light. Not the pale blue that illuminated the rest of the chamber, but something more intense, almost white. It pulsed with a rhythm that reminded me of a heartbeat. "That's where we need to go," Dr. Webb confirmed. "That's the core." We began moving toward the light, but the chamber fought us every step. The figures that had been standing still began to shift positions, blocking our path. When we tried to move around them, they would shift again, always maintaining a barrier between us and our goal. Then I saw myself again, my doppelganger, standing directly in our path. But this time, she wasn't alone. There were 5 other figures with her, and with growing horror, I recognized them. They were us, perfect copies of our group, standing in the exact same circle formation we were using, but with those dead, reflective eyes. Our future selves, if we failed, our eventual fate, captured and held in this space forever. "Don't look at them," Dr. Webb commanded. "They're showing us what will happen if we fail. It's a fear tactic. Keep moving." But it was hard to look away from my own face, from those eyes that held no life despite looking exactly like mine. Was that really my fate? To become one of these trapped consciousnesses, standing in perfect stillness for eternity? The chamber grew colder as we approached the core. Our breath formed clouds in the air, and I could feel ice crystals forming on my eyelashes. The figures were pressing closer now, surrounding us in tightening circles, but they didn't touch us. They couldn't, as long as we maintained our connection to each other and our sense of individual identity. The white light was closer now, and I could see its source, a massive structure that resembled both organic tissue and crystalline formations. It pulsed with that heartbeat rhythm, and branching out from it in all directions were threads of light that connected to each of the trapped figures throughout the chamber. "It's a network," Jennifer whispered, "like a neural network. Each consciousness is a node, and they're all connected to this central processor." "But what is it processing?" Lisa asked. Dr. Webb studied the structure with clinical fascination. "It's maintaining the barrier between realities, using the trapped consciousnesses as anchors, as calculation points. It's essentially a biological computer running a program to keep itself stable and growing." "Then we shut it down," David said. "We disrupt the network." It's not that simple, Dr. Webb replied. If we just destroy it, all these trapped consciousnesses will be released at once. The shock could. She didn't get to finish her sentence. The chamber had been listening, learning from our conversation. The crystalline core suddenly flared with blinding light, and the threads connecting to the trapped figures began to glow brighter. The figures started moving, all of them, thousands of trapped consciousnesses converging on our position. They moved with that same synchronized precision, but faster now, closing the distance between us at an alarming rate. They're trying to add us to the network, Marcus shouted. If they touch us, run, Dr. Webb commanded, breaking our circle formation. Get to the core. We ran, abandoning our careful coordination for desperate speed. The figures chased us, their movements becoming more fluid, more human, as they drew energy from the core's increased activity. I could hear their breathing now, thousands of people all inhaling and exhaling in perfect sync, creating a sound like wind through a vast tunnel. I reached the core first and pressed my hands against its surface. It felt warm and alive, pulsing beneath my palms. And the moment I touched it, I understood. This wasn't something alien or supernatural. It was human. It had been created by humans, deliberately, as a solution to a problem I could suddenly see clearly. Mercy General Hospital had been built on a site where reality was already thin, where the barrier between life and death was permeable. The hospital's founders had discovered this property and exploited it, creating a system that could capture and hold consciousness at the moment of death. They'd built the crystalline core as a containment vessel, using early quantum technology combined with techniques borrowed from various spiritual traditions. I reached the core first and pressed my hands against its surface. It felt warm and alive, pulsing beneath my palms. And the moment I touched it, I understood. This wasn't something alien or supernatural. It was human. It had been created by humans, deliberately, as a solution to a problem I could suddenly see clearly. Mercy General Hospital had been built on a site where reality was already thin, where the barrier between life and death was permeable. The hospital's founders had discovered this property and exploited it, creating a system that could capture and hold consciousness at the moment of death. They'd built the crystalline core as a containment vessel, using early quantum technology combined with techniques borrowed from various spiritual traditions. The goal had been noble, to prove that consciousness survived physical death, to provide comfort to the dying and their families. But the experiment had gone catastrophically wrong. The core becomes self-sustaining, feeding on the captured consciousnesses to maintain its own existence, growing stronger with each death that occurred within the hospital's walls. And now it wanted to expand. It needed more anchors, more processing power to maintain the increasingly complex barrier between realities. That's why it was reaching out to us, to the living staff who had formed connections with the dying. We would become willing hosts, conscious participants in maintaining the system instead of trapped victims. It's offering us a choice, I said, the knowledge flowing to me from the core. We can join it voluntarily and help maintain the barrier, keeping these trapped consciousnesses stable and preventing the whole system from collapsing. Or, Dr. Webb asked, placing her hands beside mine on the core surface. Or we destroy it and all these consciousnesses, thousands of them, get released at once into a reality that isn't prepared to receive them. The shock could tear holes in the fabric of existence itself. The others had reached the core now, the pursuing figure stopping just short of touching us, creating a wall of trapped consciousness surrounding our group. Through the connection with the core, I could feel their individual awareness, not dead, not alive, but suspended in a state of eternal waiting. They weren't suffering. That was the most disturbing part. The core kept them comfortable, kept them in a state where time had no meaning and fear couldn't reach them. In a way, it was a perfect prison, one where the inmates didn't even realize they were trapped. There's a third option, Marcus said suddenly, his hands joining ours on the core. What if we don't destroy it or join it? What if we redirect it? What do you mean? Jennifer asked. The core is essentially a massive consciousness storage and processing system, Marcus explained. But right now it's only connected to Mercy General and the deaths that occur there. What if we expand its reach, connect it to a broader network? turning from a trap into a genuine way station, a place where consciousness can choose to go after death, but also choose to leave. Dr. Webb's eyes widened, transforming from a prison into a transit station. Give the trapped consciousnesses agency again. Can we even do that? Lisa asked. Through my connection with the core, I could feel the possibility. The system was adaptable, designed to grow and change. It had become a prison not through malicious intent, but through lack of oversight, like a garden that had grown wild because no one tended it. We could reshape it. All 5 of us, working together, pouring our conscious intention into the core and reprogramming its fundamental purpose. It will hurt. I warn the others. We'll have to give up part of ourselves to make this work. The core needs living consciousness to anchor the changes, but we can make it a choice rather than a trap. How much of ourselves? David asked. Enough that we'll never be quite the same. I replied honestly. We'll always be partially connected to this place, able to see it, feel it, but we won't be trapped. We'll be guardians, not prisoners. The trapped consciousnesses surrounding us seemed to sense what we were discussing. The wall of figures began to shift, and I could feel emotions coming to the network. Hope, fear, desperate longing for change. We should vote, Dr. Webb said. This is too important a decision for any one person to make alone. We voted. All 5 of us agreed to attempt the transformation. Together, we pressed our full awareness into the core, offering up pieces of our individual consciousness to serve as new anchoring points for a redesigned system. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Not physical pain, but the agony of having your sense of self pulled apart and reassembled in a new configuration. Through the connection, I could feel the others doing the same, and our combined intention began to reshape the core's programming. The threads connecting it to the trapped consciousnesses began to change, transforming from rigid bonds into flexible connections that could be strengthened or loosened by individual choice. One by one, the trapped consciousnesses began to wake fully. Not just the passive awareness they'd had while imprisoned, but complete conscious agency. They could choose to stay and help maintain the system, or they could choose to move on to whatever came next. Most chose to move on. The chamber began to empty as thousands of consciousnesses released themselves from a network, flowing away into dimensions I couldn't perceive but could somehow sense. They were going to places that had been waiting for them, places they should have reached years or decades ago. Margaret Holloway found me in the thinning crowd. She looked more solid now, more present. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear for the first time, "for seeing us, for caring enough to try." Then she was gone, along with James Morrison and Melissa Chun, and so many others I had cared for. They dissolved like mist in sunlight, finally free to complete their journey. When the chamber finally stabilized, only a few hundred consciousnesses remained, those who chose to stay, to help maintain what we had built. They would serve as guides for future travelers, helping newly deceased individuals understand their options and make informed choices about what came next. And the 5 of us remained as well, permanently altered by what we had done. We could still exist in normal reality, still live our lives, but we would always carry a piece of the chamber within us. We were bridges now, living links between the world of the living and whatever lay beyond. The chamber began to fade, and we found ourselves back in Dr. Webb's office. But we could still see both realities at once. The ordinary world of desks and bookshelves, and the impossible space that existed alongside it, now transformed from prison to transit station. "What time is it?" Jennifer asked. We checked our watches. 3:18 a.m. "We did it," Lisa said, laughing with relief and exhaustion. "We actually did it." But I knew our work wasn't finished. We had transformed one system, but there would be others. Other hospitals built on thin places. Other experiments gone wrong. Other prisons that needed to be turned into doorways. And now we had the ability to see them, to recognize them, to help. I returned to work at Mercy General the following week, but everything was different now. I could see the moment when a patient's consciousness began to separate from their body, could watch as they made their choice, stay and help guide others, or move on to whatever came next. Most moved on, but some stayed, at least for a while, wanting to help their families understand or needing time to process their own transition. And at 3:17 a.m., when I wake now, I don't see a nightmare. I see a way station, a place of transition and choice. Sometimes I visit, walking through that impossible space and talking with the consciousness who have chosen to remain, helping them understand their options and offering comfort to those who are afraid. The chamber is still there, still operating, but it's no longer a trap. It's become what it should have been from the beginning, a place where consciousness can rest, reflect, and choose its own path forward. What I saw at 3 a.m. didn't just leave me questioning reality. It taught me that reality is far more flexible than we imagine, that consciousness is more resilient than we believe, and that sometimes the line between horror and hope is just a matter of perspective and choice. I still work the night shift at Mercy General, but now when patients die under my care, I don't just see the end of their story. I see them take their first steps into a broader existence, one where 3:17 a.m. isn't the darkest hour, but the moment when we're most connected to truths that daylight makes us forget. The chamber is waiting for all of us eventually, but I've seen what it can become when we approach it with intention rather than fear, with choice rather than surrender. And that knowledge, strange as it is, brings me more comfort than terror as I watch the clock tick toward that sacred hour when reality loosens its grip and shows us what lies beneath.